Hey everybody, and welcome back. My name is Grim, and today's video is addressing what is probably the hardest and scariest part of being a game master for any game, and that is how to set up and run a combat encounter. Today we're going to talk about how to do it in the Foundry VTT for Rolemaster Unified using Bob M's updated rule set. Now I could probably make half a dozen videos that covers all sorts of things, and I'd likely still not cover all the weird things that can come up, but at least let's get the basics down, and that way you can tackle the more oddball stuff later. So to start, we need a place where this encounter is going to take place. It could be like a dungeon or a palace, docks of a city, a forest, just about anything you can imagine. But wherever that's going to be, you're going to need a map. Now there are thousands upon thousands of maps on the internet, and there are thousands of maps, usually of higher quality, for sale on the internet in map packs that you can buy for a reasonable amount. I will always recommend these because A, they're usually of much better quality, and B, support the gaming world. Don't just steal stuff from the internet. Reward the people who are making an effort, and stacks of maps quite often cost about as much as a cup of coffee. I will say that crawling through loads and loads of images looking for the right battle map is an incredibly unrewarding experience. So another option is just to grab an editing program or an AI generator and create the map yourself. That way you kind of get exactly what you want. So let's get started. Let's go to scenes and create a scene where our encounter will take place. I'm going to call this Crossroads. And the scene properties page comes up. Now we need a background image, so I will click here and choose a file. There's my Crossroads map. Wonderfully created using AI, by the way. Okay, the scene name is Crossroads. It is GM only. This isn't a map that I want the players to be able to bring up. Do I want it to show in navigation? Over here on the left, here's my navigation. Mine's a little bit bigger because I'm a GM. I don't want this to show up for players, so I'm just going to click that off. But when it shows up, I can give the map a name. So let's call this Where Characters Go to Die. That seems nice and thematic. The background color, that's the area around the map, the dead space around the map. What color do you want it to be? I like mine to be dark. If I had a foreground image here, that would be like clouds or birds or something. I really don't use that very often, so we're going to skip that. And I think our basics are done. Tapping over to grid. A square grid looks great. I know 100 is big, so I'm actually going to drop this down to 50. The padding percentage, that's the amount of dead space around the map. I don't need a lot, so I usually just drop that down a bunch. I want the grid size to be solid lines because I want to see how big it is, and I'm going to make it as easy to see as possible. We're going to get rid of it later, but to start with, I need to see how big those squares are. If we go over to lighting, now if there is one tab that's going to mess you up the most, it is the lighting tab. Not so much on this map, but on a lot of others, it will. For our simple map, we're going to use the good old system of everyone can see everything, so we don't need token vision. And more importantly, global illumination is set, so it's lit from above. It's lit by God. Everybody can see everything. And if we wanted to, we could go over to ambience. And here is kind of fun because you can add background noises. This is what I use it for mostly. If they go into a tavern, you have tavern sounds. If they go into a market, you can use the sounds of civilization. There's weather effects. Let's try autumn leaves. Put some autumn leaves on our map and see what it looks like. We're going to save the change. And then we're going to make Crossroads the, there's our scene. Oh, look, we have autumn leaves. And we can see our grid. That grid is a little big. Every square, using the default, is 5 feet. And that's going to make this map a little smaller than I want. So just we're on scenes. Just to get back in the properties, just click on the scene name. I'm going to go back to grid. And I think I'm actually going to drop it down to about 30. Yeah, 30 sounds good. Oh, and that is a lot of autumn leaves. Let's turn that off for now. There's rain and fog and other stuff that you can play with, but for right now we don't need any weather effects. Okay, that looks a little bit better. The road's a little bit wider, but I don't like grids on my maps if I can help it. I want the players to feel unconstrained in their movement, so I'm going to go back one more time to the crossroads. And I'm going to switch from a square grid to gridless. There. There is a grid on my map, but I nor the players can see it. And it doesn't matter. Everything will show up when they try and move or when I try and move a token around the map. But characters aren't going to be locked into specific positions based on the grid, and that's exactly what I want. The most important thing is when you're done, when you make any change, make sure you save your changes. I quite often forget, then I have to go back and I wonder why things don't work. So I'm pretty happy with our little simple map. Here it is in all of its glory, but let's get the encounter itself going. So first we need to create a folder in our Actors tab, and we're going to create a folder and we're going to call it Encounter at the Crossroads. And then we need to find an NPC that our players are going to, our player characters are going to challenge. So we're going to go over to the compendium, creature law, creatures, and there's a lot of stuff in here. I've decided ahead of time that I think I'm going to challenge my players with a flesh golem. And the reason why we made that folder, if we go back to our actors, we're going to take Mr. Flesh Golem and drag him into the folder called Encounter at the Crossroads. If I open that folder, there he is. Now we've created a completely separate entity for our encounter. This is in the compendium. The compendiums are locked to players. We cannot adjust those. However, we can adjust the Flesh Golem here. Any changes that I make to this Flesh Golem will not affect what's in the compendium, so you will always have a clean copy. So whether there's another one in a different encounter, a different adventure, whatever, this copy cannot be altered by you. I'm only going to use one Flesh Golem, so we're going to close that. And if we want to see the Flesh Golem stats, we just click on Flesh Golem. Okay, we can see he has 206 hit points, base move of 21. His initiative is a whopping -2. He's slower than the average person or bear. If we go to the arms tab, we can see that he has 3 attacks, all with pretty significant offensive bonuses, which is terrific. His quickness bonus, it's terrible. It's defensive bonus is -6. But his dodge is actually at +7, and if we want to find out why, we just mouse over the information tab and we can see that he has 7 ranks of running and whatnot, and the net result is a probably total DB +1. 7 for running, -6 for quickness, a whopping +1, so he's going to be very easy to hit. One of the important tabs that you want to review before you ever deploy an NPC like this, especially, is the Talents tab. This is going to provide a lot of definition for what the creature is and how it's going to behave. For example, The Flesh Golem has an attack sequence. The creature has multiple attacks designed to be used together. When the first attack scores a critical, the creature follows it with a second attack. So in this case, it makes a wrestling attack or a grabbing attack. And if it gets a critical, next round is an instantaneous action. It gets a free crush attack. That will just devastate characters. But it's good to know. It's immune to bleeding, immune to sun. It can crush up material. It can throw rocks. It has problems healing, ambidextrous, lifeless, so on, so on, so on. Natural armor. Go through these, and you don't have to memorize them. You've got your reference right here. But a lot of this will give you a really good definition of, or at least a really good idea, guidance, however you want to say it, of how it's going to behave on the battlefield. Now, one thing that I like to do is I never give my players all the information unless they have identified something with a spell or they've made a successful lore check or a survival check or something. So I'm going to change the name of this character so that when the players find him, we are going to call it the Monstrous Igor. And we'll close that. So now when it shows up on the map, this will be called the Monstrous Igor. Now I'll describe it. It's 7-foot tall body and how its grayish skin has been pulled tight over its frame and the scars they see on the joints. How the thick fur covered legs end in paws instead of feet, or whatever I'm going to say. It's got a female head on a male body. As the GM, I never want to say, you see 3 type 1 skeletons, or 20 goblins come pouring out of the cave, when they have never seen a goblin and may not know there are 20 because 16 of them are still coming out. So now, instead of facing, and I'm using air quotes, a flesh golem, they're facing a monstrous Igor. The good news is I can always go back to the compendium, and the entry for the flesh golem hasn't changed. I can grab another one if I ever need to. We've only changed the name of this instance, so if we had multiple, we could name them Igor 1, Igor 2, Igor 3, or Larry, Moe, and Curly, or whatever we want. But the important thing is the core entry in the compendium remains unchanged. So let's put Igor on the map. We're going to drag him way down here. Oh, and he's facing the wrong way. Why isn't he rotating? Oh, I know why. I have to select him first. Silly me. Quick control and wheel mouse, and you can turn an icon to face any direction you want. Sorry about that. Now, we have our monstrous Igor on the map, but we still need some player characters who are going to face him. So we have our enemy NPC, but we still need our characters. In my test characters folder, I have some pre-mades. We're going to use Bob, the 3rd level ranger that we made in our last video. His best friend is Mr. Test Fighter. We'll grab him. And since it's right next door, their buddy, Mr. Test Magician. So we've got a 3rd level ranger, a 5th level fighter, and I believe a 5th level magician are going to go up against our good friend, the monstrous Igor. I'll say the flesh golem that the PCs are going to be fighting. He's coming up the road. He's looking for something. His head is going from side to side, and he is occupied. The PCs are actively hunting him, and I'll assume the PCs see him first, since he's actually going to be a pretty tough opponent. I will say that I'll tell the players that I do want to see if the monstrous Igor is aware of them. So I'm going to open up the monstrous Igor's character sheet, find his perception skill, and give him a roll. And just for the purposes of showing you where modifiers go, I'm going to give the monstrous Igor a -20 penalty, assuming that he is so preoccupied with what's immediately around him, he's probably not looking far up the road. So we get some dice, and that is definitely a failure. So, players, what would you like to do? Well, we have a ranger, and he has a bow. It looks like the distance between Igor and the ranger is 162 feet. That's pretty far. The ranger can take that shot with his short bow, but he will be under some penalties. I do know that our fighter friend does not have a ranged weapon with that kind of range. And our 5th level magician, let's check the range on his spells because I'm not entirely sure. Ice Law has a nice ice bolt that should be 25-foot increment, so he's probably out of range as well. So the only person who can really take a free shot will be the ranger. So he will take that shot. Assuming it takes a phase to grab the bow, get it loaded and whatnot. The monstrous Igor is walking up the road, so I'm going to give him one full round of movement. The monstrous Igor's base rate is 21, so we're going to move him 21 feet. This is actually a great place to make a note. The rules for movement inside the core law, they didn't really do themselves a lot of favor when they wrote those. They're very simple, but they could have made them, I think, much more clear. Everyone can move their base rate every single phase. If a token moves, well, the average person moves 20 feet per round per the rules, which is 5 seconds. That works out to be about 2.72 miles per hour, which is basically a slow walk. And you can thank the Google for that calculation. So a round is made up of 4 phases. If you move your base rate, or BMR, during one phase of a round, you are considered walking, and you're minus 25 to all actions for that round. If you moved up your base rate in 2 phases of the round, you are considered to have jogged, and you take a minus 50 penalty to all your actions. If you moved during 3 phases, you ran, and if you moved during all 4 phases of the round, you are considered to have sprinted. You're minus 100 to all actions, and that's pretty much all you can do at that point. So Igor, because he's just walking, he will move his 21 feet. Because that's about the point when the bow shot is going to go off. And that's 20.76, close enough. So we will click on the ranger to target the Igor. You just mouse over him, and the easiest way to do it is press T for target, and you'll know he's targeted because you'll see the 4 corner arrows pointing at the target. All right, Bob, it's time to shine. He has a plus 38 skill. Click on attack. There are no modifiers that I need to put in. Range should automatically be calculated, so I'm just going to click OK for the attack to go through. 40. And while we see the arrow fly down and hit him, it was actually a miss. You can see the attacker's OB is 13. If we hover over that 13, skill bonus is 38, but the range penalty is 25. So Bob attacked monstrous Igor, defensive bonus of 2. He rolled a 40 for a net of 55. So we're going to call that a miss, but now I will assume the monstrous Igor is definitely aware of them, and it's time to get the party started. All right, to get this encounter going, we need to get everybody into combat. So first thing we do, we highlight everybody we want to get into combat. There's our create encounter. You can right click on any of the tokens, and in the bottom right corner are crossed swords called toggle combat state. When you click on that, everybody pops into the combat tracker, and we are ready to go. Pro tip, if you right click on the combat encounters button up here on the right, it pops it out of the window, so you can stick it off to the side, and that way you're not constantly flipping between chat and the combat encounter to see the initiative order. Speaking of which, the next thing to do is to roll initiative. I'll roll for everybody since I'm the only one here. And we can see our test magician gets to go first. We're doing phase by phase, 4 phases per round, 1 phase turn. So, test magician, what would you like to do? Well, he definitely wants to start casting a spell. He knows that monstrous Igor will close the distance, and hopefully he will be in range by the time his spell is complete. So 1 point into casting a spell, 1 action point. Monstrous Igor got a nice initiative. And he will move up another, 21 feet. There we go. And that's his turn. Bob will knock an arrow into his bow after having just fired. And our test fighter, he's a melee guy. He wants to be the one to receive the charge from this thing. So his base rate is 24. So he can move up to 24 feet this phase. And he doesn't have to move his full 24. That looks like plenty of distance. He's definitely going to be the one out in front. He'll put 1 point into melee. However, if he melees this round, he will be at minus 25 because he's moved for 1 phase. Advance it up. Round 1, phase 2. The magician will put another point into preparing his spell. The flesh golem will continue to run forward. Another 21-ish feet. Bob begins aiming his bow, and Test Fighter will put a 2nd point into his melee attack as well. Phase 3. Test Magician puts another point into his spell. Flesh Golem continues to cross the map as quickly as he can. Close enough. Bob will put another point into aiming aiming his bow, and Test Fighter will put a 3rd point into melee. Phase 4. Our magician is ready to cast his spell. Hopefully the distance is decreased enough that he can actually do it. We've only put 1 round of prep into our spell. Our magician is 5th level, and Ice Bolt is 6th level, so we won't be using that. He will be using a Shock Bolt, because that's under his level. For overcasting, it's a minimum of 1 round of prep and then 1 round of cast. So, to cast that Shock Bolt, here's the modifiers for casting a spell. He's not being subtle, he's got nothing in his hands. He's definitely going to shout. He wants this terrifying beast to go away and die. He didn't do any extra prep. There's no other modifiers, so 36 should be plenty to cast the spell. And then we aim and shoot. Again, no modifiers. 48. A 5Y lightning. The size is reduced, of course, because shock bolts are very tiny, and the monstrous Igor is a large creature, +1 size. So, only 0.25 hits, -5 in size, but 5 points. A Y lightning hits him in the head, and the critical is reduced so much it's +1 hit. That's sad, but we will apply the damage. And if we want to make sure that damage has taken effect, we can click, and sure enough, we are down 6 hit points. Perfect. With a curse from the magician, we will go on to the monstrous Igor. We'll continue to close the distance. There we go. Bob the Fighter puts a 4th point into melee, but he is not close enough to actually get in close combat with the Igor. So, oh, sorry, this is Bob the Ranger. I apologize. Bob the Ranger can shoot, so let's go to Bob. Another shot with the bow. Again, no modifiers. 87's decent. A 9 critical is not decent. But it's a 13B puncture, -1 size because the Monstrous Igor is a large target. Hits him in the left leg. In goes the stabbing thing, and out comes the sticky red fluid. Should have caused bleeding damage, but the Monstrous Igor is immune to bleeding, so it's only an additional 3 hits. So we'll apply that damage as well. And then we'll move on to our test fighter, who's eagerly awaiting combat. However, the Monstrous Igor has not reached him yet, so he puts a 4th point into melee. He's ready to swing, but he doesn't have anyone to swing at. Advancing it up, we're in round 2, phase 1 of 4. Disappointed on his showing last time, the Magician begins to prepare yet another spell. The Flesh Golem, the Monstrous Igor. He will move up. Can he get there? He cannot get there. Not in one phase anyway, so he will go that far for now, and he will put 1 point into melee himself. Bob the Ranger will knock an arrow, and I see a potential problem that he's going to be suffering from a cover penalty here pretty quickly. So I'm going to move him his creep distance. His creep distance is a whopping 2.63 feet. He can move 2.63 feet per phase without incurring any kind of a movement penalty. I think I'm just going to suck it up and take the movement penalty and get a -25 on his shot. He'll hop that fence, and he'll move off to the side. There we are. And he puts 1 point into his bow. Or rather, I think he loads an arrow into his bow. And our test fighter is, let's see what the distance is between these guys, 19 feet. Well, the fighter's base move is 24, so he can close that gap. And if we look at our test fighter's character sheet, come on, test fighter, there you go. His footwork skill is +30. So if the fighter moves for one phase, he'll incur a -25 penalty to all actions. However, his footwork is +30. It will wipe out that penalty. So he will close the distance, not incurring any penalty to attack, and he will swing on the Monstrous Igor, catching him hopefully by surprise. Well, not a surprise, bonus surprise, but you know what I mean. He has a flail with a 111 offensive bonus, which is pretty decent, and a shield bash for 107. He'll keep the shield for defense and just swing that flail. Again, there's no penalty for cover, movement penalty, anything like that, so we'll just click OK. And hope for a nice high roll. Better than average. All right, an 11 ZK, 11 points, a reduced critical. Blow lands on foe's chest with a thump. Should have caused stun, but it does not. 2 additional hits, and there's a -25, a roll for breakage at -25. Well, it was in the chest, so if our Monstrous Igor had any kind of chest armor, it would have to roll a breakage check. The Monstrous Igor does not have armor, so there is no breakage check actually required. So we will just apply damage. And next phase. I think the Magician is running into the same problem as the Ranger. He has to get off to the side, so he will also take a -25 to all actions. Move off to the side a little bit. And he will put a 2nd point into preparing a spell. The Monstrous Igor, he will put a 2nd point into his melee attack. He did move, so he's currently at -25 to all actions this round. Bob, I don't think I'm going to just double check that there's no kind of cover penalty, and I do that just by drawing a straight line. Does not hit our friend test fighter, so I think he doesn't need to move. So he will just put another point into preparing his next bow shot. And having just swung, Test Fighter would put 1 point into his next melee attack. I'm going to do the same thing for Test Magician, just making sure. Yep, no cover. So we're good there. Test Magician will put a 3rd point into his spell preparation. Our Flesh Golem buddy, the Monstrous Igor, will put a 3rd point into his melee attack. Bob will put a 3rd point into aiming his shot. And Test Fighter will put a 2nd point into his melee attack as well. Phase 4. I want to go for an Ice Bolt this time from the Magician. So he will put a 4th point into his spell, but he is not going to cast. He'll be casting in 4 more phases. Flesh Golem, the Monstrous Igor, he's had enough of this, and he is going to target the fighter. And it's time for a little bit of payback, I think. So, the Monstrous Igor. We go to the arms tab. He's going to try and grab him and crush him because that grabbing wrestling attack followed by a crush sounds like the best thing he's had all day. He is taking a slight movement penalty. There are no other penalties we need to add at this point, so we'll click OK. And with a 38, he does have a pretty good offensive bonus. That is enough to do 5 points of damage to the warrior, to Test Fighter. We'll take it. He'll apply the damage. And he is done. Bob is ready to shoot. We'll go back to his bow shot. And we do have a cover penalty. Being in combat, we're going to have to manually add a -20 because when you go into combat, people begin ducking and weaving and moving back and forth, so they're a little harder to hit. Press OK, and we get some dice. 95. Things are looking good. Oh! Except I had Test Fighter targeted because of the last attack. So let me retarget, and I'm going to have to re-roll that. That's unfortunate. A waste of a shot. Those were good rolls. So let's go back to the Bob. Sorry, Bob. You had your moment of glory, and I ruined it for you. 22, not quite as good as what you rolled last time, and that is a miss. I'm sure Bob is cursing my name right now. Test Fighter. He could swing now at -25 for being 1 AP short, but I don't think he wants to. He's going to hold off for 1 more turn. He thinks he can weather whatever damage the Monstrous Igor might do to him this turn. So, Test Magician will put a 5th point into his spell. He's now actually casting his spell. Monstrous Igor will put 1 point into his next melee attack. Bob will knock an arrow. And our Test Fighter is ready to deal the pain. He'll attack. No modifiers. 52. 2 points better than average. Well, it's a glancing blow. 9 more hits to the right leg. We'll apply that damage and advance the counter. The Magician puts a 6th point into a spell. Monstrous Igor will put a 2nd point into his melee attack. Bob will begin aiming his bow. And the Test Fighter will put 1 point into melee. Magician puts a 7th point into his spell. A 3rd point into melee for the Flesh Golem. Bob will begin aiming a little bit more. And a 2nd point into melee for the Test Fighter. Once you get used to the combat, it goes fairly quickly as long as people are paying attention. fast rounds are definitely faster, but you miss a lot of the nuances that happen phase by phase. So that's why I prefer the phase by phase combat. Test Magician is actually ready to cast his spell. It's been 8 phases that he's put into this, so let's see what he can do. We're going to switch over to Ice Law. He's overcasting this spell. He's only got +3 to cast it. Once again, he is going to be shouting those command words as loud as he can. I believe it will add in the overcasting penalty, so I don't need to roll that. 46 should be plenty enough. So now we roll to hit. Let's make sure we've got the right person targeted. We do. All right. And away we go. Again, he's shooting into combat where his friend is. There's no cover penalty, but people are moving around, so he is at an additional -20. Roll high. Oh, that is definitely not a high roll. After all that, and it's a miss. That's the Magician's turn, and I swore I heard him say he's better than that. The Flesh Golem has had enough of this silliness. I have to retarget the fighter because I'm handling everybody. And it's time to just smash this puny human. Hulk smash. Not with a 0-7, I don't think. Oh, but it's enough. 5 more hits. We'll apply that damage to the fighter. Bob is also ready to take his shot. Retargeting the monstrous Igor. All right, Bob, this is your chance to shine. -20 for shooting into combat. And, oh, we might have a chance. Good things are about to happen. It's a critical. 8 points. Point breaks a finger, then sinks into the palm. Foe's pain is your gain. 19 extra hits. Fantastic. And the monstrous Igor is now suffering a -5 penalty. That's the kind of critical that Bob was looking for. He says to the wizard, that's how it's done. And we advance on to Test Fighter, who will put a 3rd point into his melee attack. The Magician is not very happy with the way his last spell panned out, and so he is going to switch back to a Shock Bolt and put a point into his next spell. The monstrous Igor will put a point into melee. Bob will knock an arrow, and Test Fighter will put his 4th point into his melee attack and give another big swing to try and knock this monstrous Igor off its toes. The rolls are picking up. We're doing better. 16 B puncture. Stabbing foe in the elbow damages the joint. Draws blood and a cry of pain. You feel triumphant. There's no more bleeding damage. 22 more hits. And another -5 penalty. So they're gradually whittling down the monstrous Igor. If we click on the monstrous Igor and we go over to conditions, we can see he's now at a hit point loss of -20. He's taken 2 -5 penalties, adding to -10, so he's at -30 to all actions. And here are the specific criticals that he's taken so far. If he takes a critical, or he's healed, or something changes, you can always delete one of these as you need to. We don't need to, but you can if you need to. And Test Fighter smiles happily that he is chopping this thing down 1 piece at a time. Test Magician will put a 2nd point into his spell. The monstrous Igor is unhappy and puts a 2nd point into his melee attack. Chuffed by his last successful hit, Bob will aim his bow at the monstrous Igor, and the Test Fighter will put a 1 point, his 1st point, into his next melee attack. The Magician will put in a 3rd point. The monstrous Igor will put in a 3rd point as well. Bob will put a second point into aiming, and Test Fighter will put a second point into his melee attack. The Magician is ready to cast his Shock Bolt. Who do we have targeted? Yep, the right person is targeted. I'll go back to Light Law and Shock Bolt to cast the spell. Always going to shout when there's nobody around to hear you. That should be plenty for the spell to go off. Oh, there it is. Attacker and melee. That's the button I've been looking for. 84 is not terrible. 33 critical is not great. 11 B lightning. Something other than a modified A is terrific. To the abdomen, power arcs into the groin and down the leg. The foe's body spasms. Again, that immune to stun. Harsh. 2 more points and a -10 fatigue penalty. Nothing wrong with that result at all. We will apply that. Now, the monstrous Igor is immune to stun. However, even if you're immune to stun, like the monstrous Igor, he should still be staggered. So unfortunately, we have to give him the staggered token. Staggered is much better than stun, but stun is still pretty terrible. The Magician is happy that he was finally able to contribute, though. And then we go back to the Flesh Golem, and he will spend his action point removing that staggered application. Bob is ready for another shot at the monstrous Igor. There it is, attacker and melee. Oh, almost an 83, I swear, but that was a miss. Test Fighter will put 1 more point into his melee attack, ready to swing next phase. And we're on round 5. The Magician will begin casting another Shock Bolt. He's done pretty well with those. The monstrous Igor, having had to get off of 1 knee from his staggered condition last time, is ready to swing. So we will target our fighter. There we go. Back over to the arms tab. Let's try and grab him again, because if we can successfully grab him, life will be a whole lot easier for us monstrous Igors. 33, that is a miss. Those penalties, I think, are really starting to add up for the monstrous Igor. Bob will start aiming his bow, and the fighter decides that he's going to hit back again. Change the targeting to the monstrous Igor. Big flail attack. An 11 isn't going to do a whole lot. Absolute miss. No, you can't be the hero every day, fighter. Sorry. The Magician throws a second point into a spell. The Flesh Golem, the monstrous Igor, puts 1 point into melee. Bob begins aiming at his bow. Fighter, 1 point into melee. Magician, 3rd point into spell. Igor, 2nd point into melee. Bob aims. Fighter, 2nd point into melee. And we're back to the Magician. Again, things go fairly quickly when you're used to the combat order. He's going to cast his spell. Plenty, if you could only get a roll like that for an attack. Attacker is in melee. It's almost like you flicked a burning match at your foe. A few more hits, but we'll take it. Monstrous Igor, 3 points into his melee attack. Bob is ready for another shot, I think. He is shooting at somebody in melee. 34. No, another miss. Good effort, Bob. And Test Fighter will put another point into his melee attack as well. The Magician, another point into a new spell. Our friend the Flesh Golem. I don't think he's done more than a few points at a time, but he is ready to attack for a 4th time, I think. Those penalties are adding up, so he's going to move over to a strike attack again. A little bit higher offensive bonus. 53. Oh, he's starting to build up some momentum, we see. 6 points of damage to the arm. Our poor fighter friend. He's taken a few points of damage, but he doesn't have any conditions that makes him worried. He's not even suffering a penalty from hits yet. So the fight seems to be going far better than I expected. Bob knocks an arrow. And our fighter really wants to try and end this if he can. So, a big swing with the flail. Not even bothering to parry for these folks. An 82. That might leave a mark. It did, but not much. Very minor critical. You hit the foe's upper arm and leave a big bruise. Take that bruise, big monstrous Igor. Magician, 2nd point into his spell. Monstrous Igor will put 1 point into melee. Bob aims. Fighter melees. Magician preps a spell. Flesh Golem melees. Bob aims. Fighter melees. And the Magician's ready to cast his spell again. A nice big hit. Could do it. We'll see. Spell definitely goes off. We'll attack. Attackers in melee. Oh, it's not terrible. Well, it's an A electricity. Full buckles around the zap to the gut as power burns the muscle internally for an additional 14 hits. They're certainly applying the hit points this poor golem. The Flesh Golem puts a 3rd point into melee. Bob, he will take his shot. He is attacking into melee with his bow. Oh, we have a good hit and a good critical. 11 AP. Point cracks a rib and penetrates the torso, missing the vitals. It would do immune bleeding, but of course he's immune. 14 more hits. And another -10 penalty to the monstrous Igor. Chipping away 1 piece at a time. And our trusty fighter will put a 3rd point into melee. I think we're nearing the end of this battle, folks. The Magician. He's not having a whole lot of luck, but he's got to continue with what he's got, so he'll put a point into a spell. Our friend the Flesh Golem, the monstrous Igor, will once again try and show what he's made of. Just a straight swing because he's getting nickeled and dimed to all the damage that he's taken. 42. Another miss. Sorry, monstrous Igor. Maybe next time. Bob knocks in. Actually, Bob is going to switch to a weapon. If a 94 with a bow didn't do enough to drop this thing, he needs to try a different tactic. So he's going to spend a turn. He drops his bow for 0 action points, draws his sword, and he is going to begin advancing. He will go his 18 feet for now. Test Fighter is ready to return the favor. Big swing with the flail. I don't know if the opponent was Flat-footed. I'm not sure why those were checked, but I'll assume that none of that applies. 68. Building up momentum. Point stabs all the way into the poor arm, damaging muscle. Foe drops anything held in his hand. He's attacking with his fists, so again, no effect. There should be bleeding damage. The monstrous Igor is immune, so no effect. 17 more hits and another minus 15 injury penalty. I want to see how our big lad is faring. He is at minus 30 hit points. That was enough to drop him down. So we will right click. We will go to effects. Up here. Oop, that's visibility. There we go. Effects. And we will mark him as dead. The monstrous Igor has been defeated. He falls to the ground. I have marked him as dead, so he disappears from the combat tracker or has a line through his name, so the party knows that he is defeated. And in this case, because he's the only enemy, the combat has finally ended with a solid hit to the arm. Now that was a long fight between 3 people ganging up on one mob. And that's the way sometimes it goes. Sometimes the criticals just don't go your way. But hopefully this battle was long enough that you got to see how quickly it can go when everybody is comfortable with the phase system, how to roll criticals and interpret them, how to cast spells, and so on. Now, if anyone has any questions, head over to the forums. There's tons of people there that are happy and eager to answer those questions. We're always coming up with new solutions all the time. But this should give you a good idea of how to run your first combat. There are other modules out there that will help you keep track of the different action points that people are spending. I didn't use them here. I only had 4 combatants, so it was fairly easy to keep it straight in my head. But if 20 goblins are on the battlefield, you'll definitely need some kind of a tool to keep track of which token is doing what action, because it becomes unmanageable very quickly. The good news is I've talked with Bob M, and he is coming up with some kind of an action point tracker that he's going to be building in to the Foundry VTT. So something is coming, and in the meantime, I know a lot of people are using the short combat rounds where everyone just declares their action using all 4 action points every time their initiative comes up. That's another solution as well. But between the 4 action point phase and the simplified rounds, you have options to make your combats as exciting as possible. I hope this has helped, and may the dice roll ever in your favor.